Okay, again, welcome everyone to this RN or Refugee Research Network webinar. The RN webinar series is designed to bring together refugee and forced migration researchers from the Global South and the Global North, along with practitioners, policymakers, and people with experiences of displacement. Each webinar session reports on current research projects and digs deeper into the different knowledge mobilization aspects, practices, and tools they pursued. The aim is to engage in a dialogue about ways to transform research into practice. The title of this current webinar is Emerging BHER Scholars, Establishing a Refugee Research Agenda in Dadaab. And we are looking forward to introducing our guest speakers in a few minutes. But first, it's a tradition to start with the land acknowledgement. And we recognize that this is being held virtually, so it doesn't capture the richness of our diversity in the locations. But since York, which hosts, I believe also BHER, it hosts the Center for Refugee Studies, it hosts the Refugee Research Network, and I believe also BHER. York University hosts all of these, so we are gonna focus on the land acknowledgement we traditionally use at York University. But we invite you to share or to consider the land you're on as well, your own territory. The Refugee Research Network acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce the founder of the Refugee Research Network, Susan McGrath. So I'm sure everyone is aware of Susan and her great work. Susan McGrath is the professor emerita and senior scholar at the School of Social Work at York University. She served as director of the Center for Refugee Studies from 2004 to 2012. She is the past president of the International Association for the Study of Forced Migration and a founding member of the Canadian Association for Refugee and Forced Migration Studies. Professor McGrath was awarded the 2015 SSHRC Partnership Impact Award for forging innovative, interdisciplinary, equitable, and cross-sector partnerships, and in 2014 was invested into the Order of Canada in recognition of her outstanding achievement in research and policy on refugee rights. And of course, she's the founder and the moving force behind the Refugee Research Network. Susan, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and over to you.
Thank you, Dina, and thanks to you and Irina Osmanen and Michelle Millard for organizing this webinar. It's our fourth in our series. And as she noted, the RN has been a global network of academics, students, practitioners, policy actors, built around relationships among 13 research centers across the global South and North. My colleague, Julie Young, is a Canada Research Chair at the University of Lethbridge. She and I have published an edited collection that seeks to capture and reflect on how the RN tried to build networks for knowledge production and mobilization, what we were able to accomplish together, as well as the challenges. And the book, Mobilizing Global Knowledge, Refugee Research in an Era of Displacement, was published by the University of Calgary Press. It is free, open access at their website. I think the links are being posted. When we were putting together the RN grant, a major concern of Professor Winona Giles was the need for post-secondary education for refugees. She mobilized a global network of educators, NGO partners, and funders to establish the borderless higher education for refugees based in the Dadaab refugee camp. There's an excellent chapter in the book, actually, written by Winona Giles and Don Dippo about the pedagogical challenges that they faced. I'm very pleased that Winona, Don, and two of the York graduate students in Dadaab are here to present on their work. The four speakers address the importance of ongoing research in and on Dadaab. The barriers to inclusivity and education in the refugee camps is the overall topic of this panel and is addressed by our Dadaab scholars with specific reference to their own research. So I'd like to introduce our participants. First in Dadaab, Sarah Mohammed Ismail, who was born in Somalia but entered Kenya in 1992 as a refugee. She completed her primary and secondary education in Dagale camp and worked for CARE International as deputy head teacher. Sarah joined BHER in 2014 and earned her BA in geography from York University in 2018. And she is currently in her second year of the Masters of Education Studies at York. Abdi BHER is also a York Masters in Education student in the program on language, culture, and teaching via the BHER program in Dadaab. His interests include provision of sustainable quality education, community transformation, developmental issues, and teacher education. For 10 years, he taught primary education, and since 2020 has been a peer mentor for the BHER program. Excuse me. The focus on full inclusion of students, education for sustainability, politics of social transformation, education and international development, multilingualism, and multiculturalism. He's also a refugee researcher. As I mentioned, Winona Giles is Professor Emerita and Senior Scholar in the Anthropology Department and Resident Research Associate at the Center for Refugee Studies, where she has taught and published in the areas of gender, forced migration, globalization, migration, education, nationalism, and war. And her recent books include Refugees in Extended Exile, Living on the Edge, and A Better Future, The Role of Higher Education for Displaced and Marginalized People. And she has an upcoming co-edited book on Dadaab called The Borderless Higher Education for Refugees, Lessons from the Dadaab Refugee Camps. I look forward to that. And she's co-led with Dawn the Borderless Higher Education project in Kenya from 2000 to 2019. Don Dippo is a university professor in the Faculty of Education at York University. His interests include the social and political organization of knowledge, environmental and sustainability education, global migration and settlement, university community relations, teacher education. In addition to his role as co-director of the BHER project, he serves on the executive committee of the Center for Refugee Studies and is on the board of directors of Success Beyond Limits, a not-for-profit community-based organization that supports high school age youth in Toronto's Jane Finch community. Welcome to all of you, and we'll pass it over to you, Winona.
Thank you very much, Susan.
I'm happy to stop sharing. Winona, if you want to share your own screen.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you. Great. I'd like to thank the organizers of this panel, Dina Taha, Susan McGrath, Irena Osminen, for inviting us to speak about the importance of research to the BHER project. The title of the panel, as you can see, is Emerging BHER Scholars Establishing a Refugee Research Agenda in Dadaab. And thank you very much, Susan, for the introduction. I'm here with panelist Sarah Ismail. I hope Sarah's here. She's having a little trouble maybe getting in, which is not unusual for us in the BHER project with technology as it is. And Abdi BHER, who is here with us. Abdi is in Dadaab and Sarah is in Nairobi. They're both MA education graduate students from York University, and as Susan said, Dawn is also here, university professor and director of the Borderless Higher Education for Refugees project. We thank the funders of the BHER project, SSHRC, MasterCard Foundation, Open Society, and Global Affairs Canada, of course, and a large debt of gratitude to the Center for Refugee Studies for many years of support, and particularly the directors, Susan McGrath, Jennifer Hyman, and now Sean Rahag. And of course, the Faculty of Education has generously, very generously co-hosted the project with CRS from 2018 onwards. And UBC, Kenyatta, Moi Universities, WUSC, and Windle International have been so generous with in their support of the BHER project. Most of you know where the camps are located, the Dadaab camps. Northeastern Kenya, just south of the Somalia border. I'm really pleased to be part of this panel for on research that BHER graduate students are now engaged in for several reasons. First of all, the project was built on and began with research about how access to knowledge is crucial for everyone, and particularly to those people who find themselves in emergency or protracted crisis situations. And yet Jennifer Hindman and I, in our early research in the early 2000s, found that the opposite was the case, that people living in long-term camp situations, yes, they had access to primary, yes, to some secondary, but very limited access to university education unless they were willing to leave their families, leave the camps, travel to urban centers, or even to other countries. So then from about 2011, the BEHR project was then built on contextual participatory research by graduate students, by Dadaab community members, and by faculty and students in Kenya and Canada to determine what and how we could teach at the university level in the Dadaab refugee camps. Secondly, we were particularly attentive to gender equity, and I'm thrilled to say that now at the graduate level, 11 out of 28 Dadaab students in process or completing their master's degree in education at York are women. And I think that's fantastic. That's not counting, of course, all the undergraduate students who have men and women, but this is just the graduate level. Access to university education has been particularly difficult for women in general, as we know, and in the world generally. And I know the obstacles for women living in refugee camps or beyond are huge. So finally, this is really the moment that many of us have been waiting for. Graduate students living in the camps and elsewhere, taking up the torch, doing their own crucial research that is at the basis of future social change, social justice, and equity. So in that regard, I want to point you to the Dadaab Response Association, or the DRA as it's known. This is their website. It was founded by former undergraduate and graduate students who engaged in BEHR related programs. Here's their website address and email, and a brief description that I just took directly from the website as to what they do. And also, Susan had mentioned, I want to share with you news of our upcoming 2021, September 2021 book to be published by Bloomsbury Publications, edited by Laurie Miller of UBC and myself. It's also part of the Circle of Research. It includes research from many of us in Canada and Kenya, students from the Dadaab refugee camp, students from the universities that are involved in the project, and also staff who were involved in administering the project. The book is our critical take on the BEHR project, and I hope it's helpful to all of you who read it. Now you're going to hear about some of that exciting research from our current graduate students. And I'm not sure, I hope Sarah was able to, she was having trouble getting into the site. So if it isn't Sarah Ismail, then Abdi Bashir will begin, I believe. Sarah, are you here? And I will stop sharing.
It doesn't look like she's here.
Oh dear, okay. So Abdi is back from prayers, not quite yet.
Yes, Abdi is there.
Is there?
Yeah, let me share first.
Okay, great. Oh, there you are. Good, good.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And the all participants, Professor Susan, Onona, Bendigo, and the rest of the team. I think I really appreciate for you inviting me this panel. It's very interesting for me. It's very amazing. It's an opportunity for me to share my research topic with you, and at least extend the connection with the other professors and your members. Thanks to that, I have been introduced by Susan and Leonard and Abdi Bashir, and before I go to my research, I just want to at least give you a background, what made me to do this kind of research and why I'm doing this. So to start with that, there are three factors that at least encouraging me to do this research. And one of it was, I think you can see my screen, I've shared it. Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could maybe just start the this, you know, the regular, how do you do that?
The presentation
Yeah.
slide rather than just the editing slide.
So I think this is my first slide now, you can see. So, and I want first to share with you the background of why I'm just in the, what pushed me, what encouraged me to do this research. And one of them is like my long stay in the refugee camp. I've been in the, as Susan at least described, my living in the camp. I've been more than 20 years in the refugee camp. That is the Dadaab camp, specifically to Hagdera. So I was just brought up in this situation, and then I've learned from my primary, secondary, and tertiary level in the camp. So having that, it was like I know the living standard of the refugees. I know the challenges they face. So that was one of the factors that encouraged me to do research in the same context of the refugees. The second thing is my experience. I've been a teacher for more than 10 years, primary teacher. So I used to be in the schools and know challenges that students are facing. So, and the last one is the chance that York University gave me to write my research since I'm a graduate student, the second year graduate student. So it's one of the university requirements that you have to write a research. So within these three factors, the two, my living in the camp, experience as a teacher in primary, and having the opportunity to write a research paper is what encouraged me to do this kind of research. And in that, I had so it's like my
click on slideshow at the top. Click on where it says slideshow, and we'll be able to see it along the top. It says slideshow. Just click on that. At the very top. Up at the top. Slideshow.
Do you see where it says home and then insert and then design?
Oh, I can see home.
Click on slideshow.
And then slideshow, animation slideshow.
That's it. That's
it. Now, click. That's okay now.
Click on that, and then from the beginning.
Or
from current slide. Then on the second, just from the left, from current slide. Over to the left, there. That's it, to the right. Perfect. Click. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think it is about issues of technical. We are not. I'm not so familiar with the PowerPoint when it comes to presentation. Otherwise, thanks. So having these two factors and the chance I got, I was to benefit from thinking like I had a problem identified. One of the problem identified was lack of full inclusion of students with special needs or students with disability in the refugee camps, particularly in primary schools. And then having this, identifying this problem, and I brainstormed myself that what brings this problem? Why is this problem here? So I came to know there are barriers that hinders, that stops the provision of inclusive education in primary schools. So in my graduate research, I took a topic which states like barriers to inclusive education for learners with disability in primary schools in Hagdera refugee camp. That's my research topic now. Having said that, when I selected my research topic, I went and did my literature review and reading a lot of books related to the field that means my research topic. I went to read a lot of articles, listen a lot of videos from different contexts, and most cases like from other places where refugees living, mostly in the Middle East, in somewhere like Somalia, in Ethiopia, somewhere. Then having that in the literature review, I've got some barriers, and one of them was negative attitudes towards learners with impairment. And when I'm saying negative attitudes, is a negative attitudes by the teachers. Teachers who are teaching this kind of students, they might have negative attitudes. And negative attitudes of other learners who are not disabled. Negative attitudes of the parents themselves. And this is one of the barriers I have identified through my literature review. And going deep to the point is like people believe in some different contexts that people with having disability, they cannot perform as the normal students. So this attitude that people maybe people have, or the whole community have, this is what is a barrier to it. It's a barrier for the provision of an implementation for inclusive education. The other barrier I've seen in the literature review was insufficiency of teaching and learning resources. Let me look at this here, right? Yeah, insufficiency of teaching and learning resources. What I mean, the learning resources is the learning aids, where the students with disability, students with special needs, have an extra need that they have to be fulfilled. There's a need that they have when they're in the schools. For instance, now, students with or a learner with disabled need to have an improvised learning aid. And when students are also in class, teaching, learning is happening, at least they need a classroom sitting arrangement. For instance, now, if a student is low vision, has a low vision, or if a student has a hearing impairment, that student needs to be arranged in a way that the student can see, can hear what the teacher is saying. How? If the student needs to be taken from the back of the class to the front of the class, so that those with low vision can see what the teacher is written on the blackboard. Those with hearing aids, I mean those with the hearing in the impairment can also hear because they're coming closer to the blackboard. So I've seen this is a barrier that it's not made available. You see, like I've been in a teacher, as I've said, a student with hearing impaired who cannot hear can be back of the class, and the student will not say, "Malimo, take me at the front." They don't say because of time, because of other things. So such things are not there. So it is insufficient teaching, and that's why I'm saying it's insufficient teaching and learning resources. So coming to the learning resources now, the students with the learning disabilities need some learning devices, learning aids. What I mean is like if a student has a hearing impairment, the student has to get a hearing aid so that at least we can adapt with other students. I think for those who are might be blind, for those who are totally deaf, for those blind, they need like the braille and this. So in general, according to my research, literature review, I came to know that there is significance of teaching and learning resources into this kind of students. Let me go to the other slide. So having this, before I go out of this slide, I also had in my mind like sustainable development goals, because I've been learning from undergraduate, graduate, then I have been engaged, I have been reading books several. So I had something in my mind that sustainable development goals that of 2030, that each and every student, each and every child has the right to go to school. So it seems like having all these barriers, it is very hard to achieve such. So coming to the next slide, and I will be having a research participant, 3 learners and 1 administrative teacher. For the 3 learners, each learner will have a type of impairment. In my research, I'll be focusing on students with hearing impairment, students with visual impairment, and students with vision impairment. Because when it comes to impairment, are very many. So in my research, it's quite narrow. I can't focus all of that. So I am just focusing these 3. So 3 of the students, one of them will be hearing impaired, another one physical impaired, and another one we have in the vision impaired. So I'm selecting this kind of students because I want them to share their real life experiences to the barriers of inclusion, since they might be affected on one way or other by these barriers, because it is them who are feeling these, challenges. So they can just share with me the barriers of inclusive education, the challenges they have access in class, in the environment, all this. That's why I selected 3 of them, each having a type of impairment. The other participant is an administrative teacher who has been in the field for primary education for almost like 20 years and above. So he has a lot of experience. So I'm trying to understand, or I'm trying for him to help me understand his experience and attitude towards teaching their learners. As I said earlier in my literature review, I've said they have seen barriers to teachers. Teachers themselves have some attitude. So I want to engage with him to understand what kind of attitude these teachers have. And then as administrative teacher, so long he can just have the ability and experience to give answer for me, what are the barriers? What are the barriers that for inclusive education for learners with impairment? So I'll be having these 4 participants, and just little bit like technicality. Let me say the same you told me, right? I think you can see it now. Sorry for that. Yeah. So having that, I'm willing at the near future, when I finish the research, that my research will at least provide as base to the voices of people with disability in the growing literature surrounding. What I mean here is that when I interview them, they share with me their experiences, they share with me the challenges they're facing. And when this is published, maybe an opportunity comes, I'm just giving a space for them, for the ideas in the growing literature. The second is like, it helps to understand better the barriers to provision of inclusive education for learners with disability. Having completed my research with the findings, it helps to understand better the barriers. What are the barriers for inclusive education? I think if you're hearing Kim, like I said, about inclusive education, about sustainable development goals, what is taken out of to achieve these sustainable development goals is there are barriers for inclusive education for learners with disability. And if the learners with disability are not part of this, there is no full inclusion. And if there's no full inclusion, the quality of education might be in question. So that's why I'm saying it helps me to understand better barriers to provision of inclusive education for learners with disability. And it also helps education implementing organizations to reshape and relocate their resources in a way that includes the learners with disability. And in the refugee camps, there are a lot of organizations, non-profit organizations, who are implementing education, particularly primary education. They are providing a lot of funds, but despite all these things, still they are not achieving their goal for the inclusion. So having this research finding, it will help them to organize or reshape or relocate their resources, might be the findings, the funding, in a way that includes the learners with disability. In a simple way, it helps the implementing organization to provide inclusive education for learners with disability. The other point is leads to quality and inclusive education in the campus, because the world now is running for quality education, and without inclusion, everybody knows there is no quality education. So it helps, it leads the provision of quality education, quality and inclusive education within the campus. And lastly, and it leads to social transformation. I think is the main thing for me as a researcher, as an educated person in the camp. My mind was like, how do you change the community? Where do you fit? What can you do for your community? You know, that was what was in my mind, and that's why I came with this research topic, at least to contribute to my community and later on have a social transformation in a sense that these findings, at least within the research, maybe now I've not taken the interviews, just like I selected the participants the literature, I finished the literature review, so I'll be doing the interview next week to come. So I hope at the end of the research, I'll be having my findings, and the findings will help for social transformation, because I'm speaking to the community. And when I speak to the communities, I'm telling them, maybe in the research, that we cannot exclude this kind of learners anymore. Let us have some ideas. Let us, you know, behave like a social being, a human being, so that at least we can include all learners in the school. I think that's all I wanted to share. And with that remarks, lastly, I want to appreciate to the team for inviting me. As I have said, it's a pleasure for me. You know, it even enlarges my, confidence to share the same and all those things. Thanks for that. With that remarks, I'll be able to answer questions, clarifications, comments in case it is there. With that remarks, thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdi. I know, Dawn, it's your turn. Would you like to share your screen, or that's not necessary?
Okay, perfect.
And Dawn, just because I'm cognizant of the time now, it's 9:41, so between 5 to 10 minutes would be ideal.
Yeah, 5 minutes for sure. Okay, I'd like to end the presentation. Thank you, Abdi, for your presentation, and your final note on social transformation leads very nicely into the way that I would like to wrap this session up with this quote by Apodare. And I think that one of the important things about this quote is his the idea of building capacity for research. I think that the graduate studies was never a part of a BHER proposal. We were very much interested in providing opportunities for students to study undergraduate education. It never occurred to us that we would be able to offer graduate studies in the refugee camps. But it was the students themselves who, in the course of their undergraduate studies, undertook small action research projects. And I think that it was in carrying out those action research projects that students understood what Apari is driving at here in this quote. That is the power of research and knowledge to really contribute to efforts to transform people's lives and to transform society. And it was our students themselves who really pushed for the opportunity to continue to develop their own research skills. They saw the research skills that they were learning as enabling them to advocate on behalf, in Abdi's case, on behalf of students with disabilities in the camps. So it really was a kind of an awakening for us at BHER, that really the building the capacity for research in the camps really does make a contribution to enabling refugees to really advocate on their own behalf and advocate on behalf of others in the camps. As has been mentioned, we have 28 graduate students right now in Dadaab. 6 of them have completed their degrees. 10 will likely finish in 2021, and the rest will wrap up by this time next year. They are just completing their coursework, and beginning to develop their research proposals. Most of our students are working teachers, and so if you look at the kinds of topics and things that that they're exploring, you're not surprised to see that many of them are school-related topics, focused on corporal punishment, on gender and education, on creating safe and inclusive schools. Sara, unfortunately, was unable to connect, but she is, her research is focused on the impacts of forced marriage on the education of women and girls in the camps. But there are other topics that our students are interested in researching. We have a group that are working on issues related to climate change. One person who is working on Somali language, and someone else who's working on describing the conditions of orphans in the camps. Most of our students began studying with us in Dadaab, but over the course of the time that they've been with us at BHER, several have chosen to return to Somalia. And you'll see here that, well, I mean, we have one graduate student who's in Kakuma, who has always lived in Kakuma, but found a way to connect up with what we were doing in Dadaab. But there are two other students, Hani and Mohammed, who have relocated. Hani has been living in Kismayu and is doing research there, and Mohammed Haji is in Mogadishu and is doing research on IDPs in Mogadishu. Abdi Omar has been hired by the UNHCR and is working in a program, a youth-focused program in Rwanda, and that is that's the subject of his research. So I think that that you can see from the kinds of subjects and the kinds of topics that our students are working at, that all of them take their advocacy role in the camps and their leadership seriously. And I think that the work that they're doing is work that is clearly focused on improving the conditions of teaching and learning in the camp, but they have also a larger agenda of doing social transformation and social change. And I think that it really does speak to the power of ideas and the power of research to have consequences in the real world. And our students are very good examples of exactly that thinking. So here's a link to the Borderless Higher Education for Refugees website if you'd like to see more about the kind of work that BHER is doing. I'd also like to offer some thanks to James Milner and the Learn project. Learn has taken to publishing the MRPs of our graduate students. So you can find published versions of those MRPs on the Learn website. And they have also put together some of those things where there's an animation, a person who's drawing that illustrates like 3-minute illustrations of the points of the working papers. So those are available on the Learn website. So I think with that, I'll wrap it up and we'll open the floor to questions and comments. Thank you. If I can stop sharing the screen. There we are.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Abdi, Dawn, and Winona for this different kind of research and different kind of presentation. And it's just an eye-opener, even for someone like myself who's working on intersectionality, like some of the themes that Abdi brought up about like disability and intersectionality when in global, like in North-South partnerships and how it should be designed to be more inclusive is, yeah, it's just like always needs this constant reminder. And as Winona mentioned, and Dawn also mentioned, that Sahra was gonna talk a little bit about forced marriage and access to education, which is definitely a central topic with a lot of clarifications and also myths that need to be clarified. Without any, I know there are lots of questions. I personally have some, but I will open the floor to our attendees. And also just a quick reminder that Michelle just posted the link for the diploma and the certificate if for any students to sign up. I'm just going to give a minute or two for people to collect their thoughts and ask the questions.
I'd like to ask a question if I could. Abdi, I'd be really interested in hearing about this local network of researchers that you and your friends and colleagues have put together. Can you tell us about that and what you're doing?
Yeah, I think if there's a panel and if there is a panel or
Abdi, sorry to cut you. If you could bring the mic a bit closer to your mouth so we can hear a bit clearer because it's a bit muffled, it would be great.
I think now you're hearing me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in this a joint website or somewhere where we can put our research and test of that.
It's a bit unclear, but Abdi, if you're able to use the chat, feel free to, I know it might not be as easy, but just to make sure that we captured everything. I think there might be.
I'm just wondering, Susan, are you asking about how the DRA came together? Maybe Abdi, is that what you were wondering?
Yes. Yeah, I'm interested in what they're doing. What do you do with each other? What does it mean to be part of the DRA? And what are you trying to do? What is the goal of working together, of the association?
Yeah, thanks. I think the array is like is a graduate. These students are graduates. Some of them have initiated to have an organization that lives based on research and sometimes giving back to the community. Although for me, like I think that was the first year cohort who had that organization. But I am aware of it. I'm not part of that organization. It's something like the first cohort who graduated from BHER initiated. The second cohort now, the way I had and the way I know about it is like an organization that mainly is research and they're trying to give back to the community. I think for me, that's the little I know. I think John knows much about that. You can give feedback.
I can speak a little bit to it. As Abdi said, the first cohort of graduates, when they completed their degrees, they were feeling quite disconnected. They said, well, I mean, I will tell you that they're waiting for a PhD to be offered in Dadaab. So, but that aside, they decided that they were very interested in continuing on with their research activities and their research work. COVID came along and people who ordinarily were interested in doing research in the camps were unable to travel to the camps. And so we made people aware of the fact that there were trained up researchers living in the camps who were available for people who were interested in research in the camps but couldn't go to the camps themselves. And so it was kind of, that was the start of, they did some contract work for the Connected Learning and Crisis Consortium, and then they received another contract from Purdue University to do some work and decided to really look into becoming a registered community-based organization in the camps and to establish themselves as a research and professional development association. So all of the graduate students are not necessarily members of the Dadaab Response Association. I mean, it was started by the first cohort of graduates, but others have been joining them. I think that as they graduate, they become affiliates of the Dadaab Response Association. But I think that they were kind of breaking new ground. And so we met with graduate students yesterday who have not yet completed, who are thinking of founding their own community-based organizations, and that they are seeking the advice and support of the Dadaab Research Association to find out exactly how to do that. One of the first groups out, I think, will be a group that has not yet kind of formalized its name, but they were called the Eco-Feminist Tree Planters of Dadaab. And they were kind of, and Dahabo, who is one of the persons who won the CRS, that first award recently, is one of the leaders of the ecofeminist tree planters who are building their organization kind of as a tribute to Wangari Maathai and the Greenbelt movement in Kenya, and are doing tree planting activities with girl students. This is a girls only activity that they are going out and they found a nursery and are going to start tree planting, I think as soon as the COVID restrictions come down. But they are also thinking of formalizing their organization as an organization focused on environment and climate change issues in the camps. So I think that we have just begun to see the formation of these refugee-led community-based organizations in Dadaab, that our students are kind of like leading the way in that regard. And again, they have a very strong advocacy mandate and are really utilizing the power of research and knowledge mobilization to try to implement changes in the camps and in their home countries. Because as I said, many are completing their degrees with the intention of finishing up and then returning to participate in the rebuilding of some of the places that many of them had to leave.
I think we have room for one more question. And if there are no takers, I would like to ask that question. I'll just be fair and give it 20 seconds. Okay, I'll go ahead. So in my day job, I'm also and with the Refugee Research Network, I'm a knowledge mobilization professional. So I'm always trying to identify this angle, and what you're doing, this partnership is the epitome of what knowledge mobilization should look like. And I was wondering, Don, you were talking about finally having community-led organizations. What are some tips, like what 2 or 3 tips, do's and don'ts of how to get there for people who are, or for people who are trying to do knowledge mobilization through partnership, North-South partnership? Obviously, like Don or Winona or Abdi, feel free to answer. This is not for a particular person.
Well, I mean, let me respond a little bit to that. And it's a funny kind of response. I'm happy to report that I had nothing to do with that. It was genuinely their initiative. You know, I myself had absolutely no idea about how to go about establishing a community-based organization and having it registered in Kenya. So this was something that they needed to figure out by themselves. I think that when the next generation of community-based organizations, I mean, I can see Abdi Bishar. Abdi Bishar was a very strong leader in his community. And I can well see Abdi Bishar founding a community-based organization and learning lessons from the way the first group set about doing that. So the expertise is kind of like on the ground in Dadaab for how to establish a community-based organization and have it registered. How to have a bank account. I mean, they have a bank account because you need, you know, there's only so much money you can transfer through the phone to M-Pesa. Pretty soon the university begins to become suspicious of all this money that's flowing to people's phones. So the importance of establishing a bank account was something that was a very, I don't know how they did it, but they have a bank account now and can receive money directly. And so these are the kind of, I mean, you know, I honestly, the knowledge of how to do that in the context of Dadaab and under the surveillance of the UNHCR is something that you would need to ask members of the DRA. Unfortunately, I mean, Sada is one of the executive members of the DRA, so it's very too bad that she was unable to connect with us this afternoon. She would be able to speak much more directly to that.
Well, to that note, I'd like to, sorry, did I cut someone? Abdi, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I think those students who are engaged, graduate students are some of the virtual youth in the camps. So they're working, maybe they're working for different organizations, some of them working for BHER. And I think although they are refugees, when a refugee is like access to the opening a bank and an organization, there's limitation, of course. But at least there's way to communicate with UNHCR, facilitate something so that at least they know, understand. You just present your organization, you present what you want to do for the community. And if they see this something before, at least they can help you push to have your bank account or all these things. I think it's a long process. For me, it's like the way I know, I've not initiated it. Of course, as Don said, Professor Don said, as for two, you are thinking about, in the camp, everybody's looking like, what can we do for the community? It's like, it's going to make sense. You learn something, you go, and then you look for employment, you work for yourself, you learn, you eat for your, no, it's not like that. People are looking for solution for the camps, and everybody's looking solution for his nation. So this is a field of practice. This is where you need to practice, help in the people in the refugees. Mostly we are focusing on the education sector. That's, most of, it depends the environment you are coming from. We are educators. The first thing we want to think about is quality education, is inclusive education in most cases. So I think it is possible, although I know it is quite challenging. And of course, Core 2, as I have said, we had something to do in mind. Now we are quite busy about MRD, the main research paper. When you're graduate and you're working on research paper, doing another activity you might. But I think by April somewhere, we are done with our MRD, God willingly. And yeah, everybody is thinking of this. I think we'll be having the same that Core 1 had. And about what you said, interested connection. Yeah, I think we are interested to connect to the rest of the world. Like Canada is such organization, anybody trying to fund. If there's panel for presentation, we want to expand our ideas. We want to learn from other people, and we also want people to learn from us. I think that's it. Thanks. That's pretty much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and that just opened room for another discussion. But I know we're past 10 o'clock, so I'm just going to wrap this up. But feel free to stay after we stop the recording for another discussion. IR, I noticed you have a question there. I also want to draw attention to the idea that Michelle dropped in the chat, where because we missed the opportunity with speaking with Sarah, maybe this is something that we can work on together with having like a speaker series to support the BEHR students and leaders themselves. So just a thought to consider. And let me just quickly share my screen. It's I'm glad we mentioned or we referred to James Milner, because our upcoming webinar is actually going to be with LEARN, Local Engagement Refugee Research Network. And it's going to be also on the Global North, Global South Partnership and Localizing Knowledge. So we're inviting you to that. I think the date was booked for April 20th, but stay tuned for all the details in your email box. And yes, please share with your work with us. We also publish the bi-weekly digest. If you have any reports or any upcoming work, even the great literature, we'd like to consider it in our digest. And please sign up for our digest and follow us on social media. I believe Irina is going to share the information in the chat box right now. And finally, if you have any questions or any suggestions, share them with Dina Taha at yourq.ca and also through our social media channels. I wonder if there are any last thoughts from Susan, Michelle, or Irina, if I missed anything. If Michelle, I believe, or Irina have shared the students' certificate and diploma in registration link. And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and see you in the next webinar, and have a wonderful morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Yes, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Stop recording.